Hello everyone. Our today's topic of discussion is another American novelist, the writer who is famous for postmodernist and metafictional fiction, John Simmons Barth, shortly known as John Barth. John, John Simmons, Simmons, Barth, Barth. John Barth was born in 1930 and he is still alive. So there is no question of knowing his year of death. He was born in Cambridge, Maryland, US. As you know, many of the cities there in US are named after the cities and the places of England. So he was born in Cambridge. So don't be confused that Cambridge means England. Here we have Cambridge in Maryland, US. He did his graduation and post-graduation, BA and MA, from Johns Hopkins University. His thesis novel, he wrote a thesis novel, its name is The Shirt of Nessus. That is also a famous myth. One can find out this myth from Wikipedia. His thesis novel, The Shirt of Nessus, drew on his experiences at that university. So he is very much concerned with this Johns Hopkins University. You will know that how he was the student of that university and later he became professor there also. And he wrote one work that is also concerning his experiences in that university. Was a professor at Pennsylvania State University from 1953 to 1965. So you should know that he is a novelist as well as an academician, a professor. Was appointed as a professor at Pennsylvania State University from 1953 to 65, and then State University of New York at Buffalo. Don't mispronounce it as Buffalo. That is Buffalo. Even in in our culture, the animal that is known, जिसको भैंस बोलते हैं हिंदी में, that is not buffalo, that is buffalo. So State University of New York at Buffalo, 1965 to 73. Then at Boston University as a visiting professor. As you know, visiting professor, one can work as at two places. At one place one can be the permanent teacher, and at other place one can be the visiting professor. Even Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, there was the time when he was teaching in two universities at the same time, one in India, other one in England. So he had to visit every week from one country to other country. Was working as a visiting professor. Okay, here as you can understand, he was a visiting professor from 1972 to 1973 at Boston University, and at the same time in that period also, that lies in between 1965 to 73, he was the professor at State University of New York at Buffalo as well. Okay, and ultimately he joined in Johns Hopkins University in 1973 and worked there till his retirement 1995. Okay, Barth began his career with the floating opera. The correct pronunciation is opera. Ra will be aspirated. while having British pronunciation, and then will not be aspirated in American pronunciation, that is opera. In British one it is opera. The floating opera in 1956, and the second one, which is considered as the successor of this the floating opera, and its name is The End of the Road in 1958. These were two short realist novels dealing with suicide and abortion respectively. So the floating opera talks of suicide, and The End of the Road talks of abortion. Then in 1960 he wrote The Saltweed Factor. The Saltweed Factor, it marked Barth's discovery of postmodernism. From here you can trace that his postmodernism and his metafictional writing starts taking place. So before this, means in previous two novels, The Floating Opera and The End of the Road, these were not metafictional. These were short realist novels, but from this, The Saltweed Factor, that was published in 1960, it marked Barth's discovery of postmodernism. Then in 1966, Giles Goat Boy, a very interesting novel, a speculative fiction based on the conceit of the university as universe. So here you will find how he has thought of university as a universe. Giles, a boy raised as a goat. So here we have a protagonist whose name is Giles, and he is a boy, and he is raised as a goat, discovers his humanity and becomes a savior. In later period he discovers his humanity and becomes a savior. Then we have his short story collection published in 1968. Its name was Lost in the Funhouse. And then other one is Chimera, Chimera, published in 1972. That is a novella collection. One thing that one should remember regarding this Chimera, it shared the US National Book Award for fiction. Shared means it did not get just for itself. It shared that prize with other writer as well. It shared the US National Book Award for fiction. Then we have Letters. In 1979, Barth interacts with the characters from his first 6 books. So in this particular work, Letters, he interacts with characters from his first 6 books. Okay? And one thing that one should remember regarding John Barth is not only his fiction, but also his essays, and especially in those essays, the first one, that is the literature of exhaustion. The literature of exhaustion, 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 published in 1967. It was considered as a manifesto of postmodernism. Remember this. His essay, The Literature of Exhaustion, is considered as a manifesto of postmodernism. Why? It depicts literary realism as a used up tradition. Means here he makes it clarified that literary realism has now become the thing of a past. As a used up tradition, Barth's description of his own book is How does he talk of his own books? He says, novels which imitate the form of a novel. So here we are having his definition of metafiction, his later works. Okay? Novels which imitate the form of a novel by an author who imitates the role of author. This line is, being quoted from his essay. The name of the essay was The Literature of Exhaustion, and which was considered as a manifesto of postmodernism. And then other essay that he wrote is The Literature of Replenishment. When we talk of the first essay, that is The Literature of Exhaustion, it was widely considered as a statement of the death of the novel. See, very interesting. This can make you reminded of Death of the Author, the famous essay written by Roland Barth. That is considered to be magnum opus in reader response theory or post-structuralism. Here we are having this essay as which declares the death of the novel, not the death of the author, death of the novel. Okay. Barth's work is characterized by a historical awareness of literary tradition. This one should remember the main concern, the main concept. Barth's work is characterized by a historical awareness of literary tradition, means as if he was historically aware what kind of tradition was going on and what should be the changes with the passage of time. In his postmodern sensibility, parody is a central device. Remember this. That is why we are having novel talking of novel, we are having author talking of author. Okay, imitating the role of author. So, in his postmodern sensibility, parody is a central device. Parody. And this concept of parody is very well defined in the essay by Frederick Jameson. Frederick Jameson, or I should talk of that English essayist. I'm forgetting his name. Who is known for his famous essay regarding postmodernism. Okay. Let's talk of the Floating Opera. A philosophical novel which contains existentialist and nihilist story. So you understand existentialism, where the existence is questioned, and the nihilist story, it was first published in 1956 and significantly revised in 1967. So this novel was first published in 1956 and was revised in 1967. So we can talk of the nihilism. What is nihilism? What do we understand by nihilism? The philosophical viewpoint that denies or lacks belief in any or all of the reputedly existing and meaningful aspects of life. So nihilism is negating. Okay? It is negating the beliefs, the reputed beliefs of existing and meaningful aspects of life. It denies, it negates or lacks belief in any or all the reputedly existing and meaningful aspects of life. Means whatever aspects we think of life, whatever meanings we want to extract from life, the importance of our living we extract from life, this nihilism denies nearly all. Most commonly, it is presented in the form of existential nihilism. So in nihilism, the specific one we have is existential nihilism, which argues that life is without objective meaning, purpose, or intrinsic value. So this tells all. This existentialist nihilism argues that life doesn't have any objective meaning. It is meaningless. It is purposeless. It is valueless. It has not any intrinsic value. And then another sector that we are having in nihilism is of moral nihilism. Moral nihilists assert that morality does not exist at all. See, as we know the famous quote by Shakespeare, there is nothing good or bad, but our thinking makes it so. So morality, of course, these all are something that is made by the society. Okay. So moral nihilists, they assert that morality does not exist at all. The term is sometimes used as association with anomie, ANOMIE, to explain the general mood of despair. Nihilism is also associated with this term anomie to explain the general mood of despair at a perceived pointlessness of existence. Again, pointlessness of existence that one may develop upon realizing there are no necessary norms, rules, or laws. So when we talk of morality, we talk of several rules, regulations that is made by the society. So it says there are no necessary norms, rules, or laws. So why should one bother for such things? This moral nihilism talks of that. Okay. Okay, when you talk of this, the floating opera, just a very short introduction of one page here. We'll talk of the plot in another video. The floating opera can be viewed with the end of the road. See, these two novels are understood together. The floating opera can be viewed with the end of the road as forming the early existentialist or nihilist phase of Barth's writing career. So as a writer of existentialist fiction, Barth stands here after writing these two novels in the initial phase of his life. This phase was realistic. It means he was not always realistic. This phase was realistic in a modernist sense. It means it was not something postmodern. It was not something concerned with postmodernism. It was something concerned with modernism, because a realistic thing was there. A realistic depiction was there in these two novels. It lacked the fantastic elements that manifested themselves in Barth's experimental phase that began with the salt-weed factor. As I told you already, that his writing took a turn from the salt-weed factor, because from there we'll find that how postmodernism and metafiction started affecting his writing. But these two were the floating opera and the end of the road. These two were his realistic depiction. This novel means the floating opera. This novel, while displaying a distinctive style, followed conventions readers expected from a novel. Why do we need to talk of these all things? Because in later period, when he started writing novel, his novel was not following the norms of a novel that we expect from it. But this novel followed the norms what readers expect from a novel and was part of the realist trend. Mind it, these all words that I have written with the red pen. Realist trend in novels prevalent in the United States during the 1940s and 1950s. As the novel closes, its protagonist, what is the name of the protagonist of this novel? Todd Andrews, concludes that life has no absolute values, but that there are relative values. See, the turn of thinking, the turn of the philosophy. Life has no absolute values, but that there are relative values that are no less real. So in this unrealistic life, we'll have to find something more realistic. Means something relatively realistic. What does it mean? It means, for example, if two things are meaningless before us, so if we have to find out some meaning out of that, we'll try to find out which one is more meaningless and which one is less meaningless. And we'll have to follow this less meaningless. Means in the comparison, in the relativity, we'll have to find something, some values for living the life. Okay? See, for example, as we have in politics, when the elections are going on and when several people are standing in the election, they are demanding vote of the voters. So when one tries to decide if all are corrupt, so which person can be decided as the leader? So we go with the option, the person who is least corrupted. Means we don't have any option. When you don't have any option, if all are corrupt, then the least corrupt one will be the selection. So that is how relativity, how this relativity affects the life. I hope he must have read this theory of relativity by Albert Einstein. One must be aware of such things. When everything goes bad, then we'll have to try to find out some values, some things, some concepts in our life with this relativity, that which one is less bad. I will have to think of that. Okay. Barth said that the end of the road, the second one, was a nihilistic tragedy paired with the nihilistic comedy of the floating opera. So in Barth's view, you can say that the floating opera is a nihilistic comedy, okay, which stands against nihilistic tragedy, the second novel, that is the end of the road. Okay, I hope now intro is clear. Thank you.